Patricia.
Well, greetings, everyone, and thank you for joining. And it's an honor to be here. And I'd like to start our hour together by being silent for a moment and connecting with the land, either where you are presently and your favorite places to go, or else where you grew up and land you went to for solace, for safety, and for that sense of belonging. So I'll just do an orientation with you. So first, being aware of your breath. Your neck, your shoulders. That's where we carry most of our tension. And the bracing that we did in childhood. So just being aware of that. And not attaching to it, just noticing it. And then finding yourself in that place. For me, one of the places is the Beaver Pond in a place called 2 Mile. And I loved it. So just that sense of orienting yourself wherever it was that gave you that deep sense of belonging. And feeling yourself grounded, held by the earth, held by gravity. And aware of the direction to the north and what's there. To the east where the sun rises. To the south. And to the west. Just noticing as you're in that place of belonging and calm, what happens to your nervous system and your mind. And I want to remember all of the people, those good people who have been a part of my life to help me on my healing journey. So coming back fully and completely now into this group and orienting yourself in the chair that you're seated on and the 4 walls that surround you, where the door is, the ceiling, and the floor. So the title of this is Trauma-Informed Practice, Conflict, Engagement, and Resolution. And I look at the title and I think, wow, you know, just looking at trauma alone needs a lot of time. And then when we look at conflict and engagement, that too needs time, because that's connected to how we think and what we believe about ourselves and others. And I would say it's also related to trauma and our childhood experiences and how we respond to perceived threat. So my intention is to, in this time together, is point to the incredible resource of Ancestral Law. And where I first learned of it was in Gitxaala territory. It was a conscious learning there. After I had found out, my daughters were 3 and 7 at the time. Now my 7-year-old is 40. So at the time, I found out my father was sexually abusing my daughters. That's a huge conflict. Internally first, and then in the family. And I was living in Hazleton at the time. And when two women learned of this, one of them, she was a chief, a hereditary chief, her name was Vi Smith, and the other was Jane Smith. And they said, come, you need to learn the language, you need to come to the feasts, you need to be a part of society. So it was like one on one arm, one on the other, and these two women just ushered me in. And they said, even though this isn't where you're from, we're Somali speaking people, and this is your culture too. So the first feast I went to was in Kispiox, and it was the memorial feast for Connie Morgan's mother. And I'd met Connie Morgan. She was originally from Kispiox, and she married a Morgan from Gitxaala. And so I went to that feast, and it was the first feast that I went to, and I was blown away. So for those of you who don't know what I mean by feast, another word for it is potlatch. And so I had a sense, only a sense, that what I was witnessing was perfect order. That was what was unfolding before me as they were serving the meals, as there was an MC, I was seated, all of these things that were happening. It was this perfect order. And in Gitxaala territory, it's called a yoke. In Niska territory, it's called a yuk. From where I'm from, where my mother was adopted, and where my father's mother's from in Gitxaala, it's called a yao. All the same Somali speaking people. So at the time, I was blown away. I had this sense that my father, being an Indian, we've gone through so many names: Native, Indian, First Nations. Probably you can add other names to that, but when I was young, it was Indian. And I thought that the suffering that I was experiencing was because he was an Indian, and that there was no way out of this sentencing to inferiority until I went to, and all unconscious, until I went to the feast. And that feast was what I needed. So basically, I was on a pathway when I did research for my doctorate. I said, how do we talk about change? I was speaking to 3 fluent speakers from Gitxaala, and they said, it's like a person's on one road, and then they change to another road. So life circumstance had me move from the one road to a road of inquiry, to a road where my life was changing. And I had to figure out who I was, how I was a part of what this was that was happening in the family, or had been happening in the family. So this is all the primary conflict that we all bring into community, our family and our family dynamics. What I found is that if there was no one who could help me to understand it in a good way, in a truthful way. So coming to the place of understanding that I have today really comes from the feast hall. And we have this way of resolving conflict through ancestral law. It's in every Indigenous nation. Your law is there. And our disconnect to that law isn't about the impotency of it. It's about our collective trauma. So there is a conscious, people have said, well, we've forgotten or it's lost. I've heard all of these things in a way of speaking about it. And so it's in our DNA. And that's what I discovered when I sat in the feast hall, because it felt the beauty and the power and the wisdom felt so familiar. So it's in our DNA. And it's in the DNA of whatever community you're working with or whatever you're in. So resolving conflict, there's already order there to resolve that conflict. And an example is, well, first I should say that the structure, we have a clan system, and it's different in every nation, but basically in the Somali speaking nations, which is Gitxaala, Niska, and Tsimshian, there are 4 main clans or tribes. They're Pedaic. And that's our structure. So my mother was a white woman, and she was adopted by Simoy Gitxaala from the Lachskig. So she became an eagle from that adoption, which being matriarchal, which made all of us eagles. Why is that important? Well, it's important because then I belong, and my siblings belong, and my children belong. So one of the things we lose through trauma is a sense of belonging. One thing we lose in conflict is that sense of belonging. So she was adopted, she's eagle, she married a blackfish or a killer whale. And in our law, we don't marry from our own tribe. Why is that important? Because for many reasons. One is blood relationship, the obvious. And then the other is because when, for example, there's a death, then it is Connie's mother's side that hosted the feast, that gave away the belongings, that gave gifts for all the witnesses that were there to see Connie's mother's name passed on to someone else. We're all witnesses to that, and we're paid as witnesses. So when there's conflict, we can come back and say, but that person was accountable for what they did wrong. And they hosted their chief, through their chief, they hosted a cleansing feast. So this way, we're learning to let go. We're learning about what we do when conflict happens, the responsibility and accountability, and then how we move in a good way to address it. Whether the conflict's incest in a family, or whether the conflict is about who gets what name, or this person's adopted this person. So I think probably now is a good time, George, we can move through the introductory slides.
Here you go. Can you see that?
Yeah, Jeannie and Laura are nodding, so we can move past this, George. So this is, I didn't mention that on my father's side, his mother's father's from Haida, and his name was Amos Collinson. And I was invited by the health director and the chief counselor to move to Haida to do trauma work. And I was there during COVID and the lockdown. It was my first time living in my great-grandfather's territory. It was amazing. And the health director there is doing great work. She is working to found all of health there on Haida Ancestral Law. So this is Balanced Rock. For those of you who have not been to Haida Gwaii. My great-grandfather was from Shpagilda, which is Skidegit. And so ancestral teachings, also known as ancestral law, are a constant support for individual and collective spiritual balance. Okay, and the next slide. So I've done many walks. You can pass this one too, George. Many walks up Spirit Lake Trail, and I think maybe it must have been 6 months, and then I stopped and I read this sign. And I thought, this is fantastic. So the top part in Heidegger, and then the bottom part is the interpretation. So we are taught during our lifetime that it is necessary to respect all things. The supernaturals of the underworld and the upper world live together. Our ancestors guide us in living with the sea and land. Respect this land, not only Spirit Lake, but respect all of Haida Gwaii. Okay, the next slide. So I want to say as I go through these slides that I didn't have this when I was growing up. I grew up, my first 7 years were in Gitxaala territory, and then the rest of my childhood was in Victoria. Like our family was a little village unto itself. So when incest was happening, I didn't have my cousins to go to. I had to hold it in. So I'm so happy to have had the last 30 years to be speaking with elders from different nations. My hunger has been huge. So, so to see this in writing and up where everybody can read it, this is great support for community and helping people who are not Haida have an understanding. So the first principle here are ways of being or respect. And we respect each other, we respect all things, we take only what we need. And I want to add that I'm learning to live respect from the heart, not just the head and behavior, but also from the heart. Responsibility, we need to look after Haida Gwaii for those that are born after us. So, and those that we're living with and learning how my father's gone now, as is my mother, but how do I live a life of respecting him and respecting my mother? Next slide. Interconnectedness. So we started with the visualization, and you either went to land where you're living now that nourishes you, or you went to land that helped you when you were a child. So that's that everything depends on everything else. And then the next one, balance. I first learned of spiritual balance. I traveled with the Niska for a year on the road before the treaty was finalized. And that's when I first heard from Bert McKay, spiritual balance and what it meant. So here, here it is again, and probably in all of our cultures. The world is as sharp as a knife. And then reciprocity. This is our potlatch and Haida way of life. And I see also that as a mother who had rage when my 4 adult children, now adult children, were young, the reciprocity is my accountability and my responsibility to them as their parents, and as I'm the grandmother now. So still parenting my children and being accountable and responsible, and knowing better how to love and to have the honor and privilege of being able to do that with my 9 grandchildren. And the last one, which I relate to as humility, is we seek wise counsel. So next slide. And this is on the north end, Masset end of Haida Gwaii. And there's a really beautiful, you can find it on YouTube. This is Tohil. And there's the Sacred Story of Tohil on YouTube. Sacred stories are the teachings that help us to understand the meaning of respect in relationships between animals with each other, humans and the land, and humans with the supernatural. Okay, that's it for the slides to give you a sense of the visual of when we're speaking to ancestral law, what that means. I'm keeping track of time because I really like dialogue to happen, and I want it open for dialogue as well. So there's one thing further. There's this book out, and it comes from the Gitxaala land claims. I'm trying to remember the title of this book. I can't right now, hopefully it'll come, but it's beautiful because the first chapter is the address of Delgamuukh to the crown. And if you haven't, I'll be sure to send it, or CC, if you know the title of this book, it'd be great if you put it in chat so everybody has reference to it. So in that address to the crown, he speaks of ancestral law, and he does it in such a beautiful way. And for me, he simplifies it. And so what Delgamuukh says is that there are these, he doesn't say this, but this is how I interpret it, that there are these components or strands or parts. None of those I would actually use. I would look to the language to speak to it. Probably ways or processes might be the closest. So there's the feast hall, and that's where all the legalities happen, and there are witnesses. And then there are the sacred stories, and that's encounters with supernatural beings, and it's how we get our power as a people. Then there are the cleansing ways, and so when conflict happens and amends are being made and restitution, there's a whole way in the territory where you live that the First Peoples have for restoring balance and wiping everything clean again. And then there's also the personal cleansing. And this varies to wherever you're from. So I've adopted the sweat lodge. I respect and really appreciate this way of cleansing. And I also have been taught how to bathe. And usually in our matriarchal societies, our mothers or our aunties teach us how to do this. So there's the bathing, there's the sweat lodge, and then there's the fasting. And there are plant medicines that we take to clean us out as well. And in the territory, actually, I'm living in Terrace right now. I'm in Tsimshian territory, and I'm living in my oldest daughter's home. How's that for a switch? I'm room and boarding in my daughter's home. So, so the medicines here are Devil's Club. So that's used for bathing and also to make a tea to drink for that internal cleansing. And then when a conflict happens, then I would go to the, not directly to the chief, but to the matriarchs. And I would say, this is what's happened. My son's foster son broke the glass of this truck, and what do we do next? So sometimes the RCMP are brought in, and then there's, of course, there's payment for the damage done. And then there's a way, depending on what the damage is. So for my father, he wanted to be able to go home and to apologize to all he'd offended and to go through a cleansing feast. Unfortunately, that didn't happen before he died. So there's a process and there's a way to be wiped clean, to be able to speak about conflict in a good way without blame and without judgment and without criticism. So Buddhists would call those poisons. So I'll speak some to trauma now. And there are different ones. Probably the main ones I go to for trauma are Bessel van der Kolk. He's a psychiatrist in the States. And there's a short video that you can find on YouTube. It's about just over 3 minutes long. And it's trauma changes the brain in 3 ways. So this is really important to know, that the trauma changes you physiologically. So when you're going through, whether it's neglect, whether it's your parents being afraid that you're not going to do well, and so they dominate and control it, a lot of what you do, all of that really is trauma, or whether it's physical or sexual abuse. All of that is trauma, and when it happens repeatedly, then your brain changes. And so he outlines how it changes. Yep, that's great. Thank you. I see The Body Keeps the Score. And that's a great book by Bessel van der Kolk. And when Gabor Mate and In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts is a great book, because he brought us to a different place in relating to addictions. And I really appreciate that. And of course, he's moved on from that, just going more deeply into trauma and what it means, how it impacts and changes us. So one thing that Gabor says is that it's a disconnect. So it's a disconnect from myself, my authentic self, my true self, my real self. I think some other, that I could speak to is that it alienates and isolates. So as an Indigenous person, I was alienated and isolated from the Ayau, from Ancestral Law. I look at the name of this organization, Nuxalk, One Heart, One Mind. And from up where I'm from in Somalia, it's Sakait Gulam Qawat, One Heart, One Mind. So I was so happy when I learned that, not so much Squalo. Yes, we're connected, this interconnectedness. So, and that is, when we look and we see that the brain changes, that we perceive threat where there is no threat, that that because we've gone through whatever experience it was in our life, that we disconnect with our body. So how we relate to others, our pleasure is dampened. So our joy is dampened. For me, play, all of these things that are so important to being human, they're dampened or constricted. So when then I let me go back to when I was with FNHA, and my boss at the time was Katie Hughes. and I developed 2 trauma training programs that were being delivered provincially, and I was running into problems. And what happened was I was then began to perceive threat where there was no threat. I became paranoid. And I was in neurofeedback because it works directly with the brain. And then through neurofeedback and through counseling, I came to see what was happening. And that really what it was is that I was triggered into a trauma sequence. So I wasn't living in the present, I was living in a threat of something that no longer was, but it was in my brain. So she asked me, well, what do I do then? How do I help? What do I do the next time? And I said to her, just listen, just hear me, and let me know that you hear me, and don't judge me. So I appreciate neuroscience because I could go to them. It happened again where I was on this edge of the knife of life and death. And I knew it was, and insanity and sanity, and I knew this was a childhood reality. And so I was doing a neurofeedback research study, and in mental health and in medicine, they would look at me as incompetent and incapable. That would be the judgment or the diagnosis. I contact the psychiatrist, she's a neuroscientist, Ruth Lanius. I said, Ruth, I'm in trouble. I know I'm in a childhood, triggered into a childhood reality, and that it's my brain, and I can't regulate myself. So she put me in touch with a psychiatrist, Frank Corrigan. He has papers that are published, and he's developed for healing the brain something called deep brain reorienting. And so what I did with you, the beginning was about orienting yourself to a place of peace and strength. So there's a fuller way to orient yourself, but you know, when I read about it, I thought this makes sense. This really makes sense, because think about if you're either your mother or your father are hunters or fishermen, or they're in the outdoors, what do you always have to be doing? You have to be orienting yourself and knowing where you are all the time. So they're looking at the brain, the superior colliculus and the periaqueductal gray, these 2 parts in particular of the brainstem, and they're seeing how this is the place where the trauma sequence is. And the trauma sequence is the actual impact, so the threat, and then it's the brace it, the tension. You know, I said where we hold it in our neck and our shoulders. Then there's the tension, and then there's the shock of whatever it is that happens. And then, while we're in shock, you know, later on a person might say, I should have done this, I should have done that. Well, the thing is, when you're in shock, that part of your brain is not accessible. There's no emotion and there's no cognitive way of finding escape, not when you're in shock. It's the body's way of protecting itself. It's amazing. And then coming out of shock, then that's when you have the affect, the emotions. And then the final is when this happens over and over again, then for me, it was dissociative amnesia. There were large parts of my childhood that were missing. And some part of us, we have the sense, we know that something not good happened. But hey, you know, people say, no, I wasn't abused, or no, I didn't experience trauma, when we all have. And we all have this trauma sequence in the brain. So I think the best way to to be with people who are in fight or flight. No, I think the people who've helped, I know the people who've helped me the most are people who are willing to be compassionate or willing to be present without judging me or criticizing me. Those have been the most, let's say, the biggest medicine people in my life. And I'm grateful to have had them. So I think I want to stop there and open it for questions and dialogue.
I guess I will interject. I mentioned earlier, for those who are not, my mother, Maisie Wright, and she was my mentor, and we're matriarchal. I'm Gitxaala. Learned a lot from her, and she was my core when dealing with, when I worked in community as administrator. I found that I always had to keep, because when you do change and when you have to do change, or you're doing a program or something that people don't like, they go after you. And one thing, I guess, that tool that she helped me learn is that if they're angry, it's not angry. Don't personalize it, right? Don't own it. Don't try and understand it. You can't fix it. It's theirs, but you can, as you mentioned earlier, just sit and listen. And I spent a lot of time sitting and listening, and that's why yesterday I commented, like, we brought in different types of healers to see what connected with people, just to snap them out of it. And I found just listening and not judging. And even when people come at you angry, we always intend to personalize it, but at the time, I don't. But what I found too is that I stopped taking care of myself. Like, my mom's not there as a reminder to take care of myself. So this was very helpful and beneficial. We lost my mom, who was a great teacher on the spiritual matriarch side, and taught me that. And then we also lost Neil, my father-in-law, who, like, we walk in both two worlds, and he was very supportive in understanding that. And it's thank you for your kind words. And the tools do help. And the biggest thing, I think, for people that they need to know is when you come across, or people are acting, and it's not themselves, or they seem off, just give them space and just be there to listen. Yeah, that's all I have to say and share. Thank you.
Beautiful. And if I can say something, if it's okay. Yeah, okay. Another way of looking at interconnectedness is that all that they've taught you is in you. And yeah, and it's in you as a tree rooted. That's the beauty of the interconnectedness. Yeah, so may it grow and be strong. Kim?
Yes, I just want to thank you for your beautiful, beautiful and wise words in regards to trauma and how it creates so many different impacts in not just my life, everyone's life, and that interconnectedness. It really resonated with me when you spoke on our DNA in how we are innately First Nations, Indigenous, Native, whatever the word is being used today, like you mentioned, right? But that is who we are. And if you don't mind, I'll just share a 1-minute story with you on how that so hit home with me. We've lost our displaced, lost, whatever you want to use the words, much of our culture, language, and tradition. I'm from the East. And my daughter and I attended our first moon ceremony in May. And it was very emotional for both of us. And she's 10 years old. But while we were sitting there hearing the thoughts and the prayers and the thank yous, hearing people's stories, there was just so much energy, and that connection was so there that it was really heavy on my daughter. And being so young and not having been taught how to even cope in an Indigenous way, she knew innately what she had to do. And she just kept nudging me, Mom, we got to stop by the lake before we go home. A little while later, Mom, don't forget we have to stop the lake. She said it 3 times. So we did leave, and we were driving past where we park our boat and everything. And she's like, don't forget to stop. We stopped, and I let her have her space, and she went out there and she went to the water and she cleansed herself and she said some prayers. I'm not sure what she said, but it just goes to show how we are born with this and how it is in us, but it's been suppressed for so long, you know, because of our history and whatnot, that, you know, we really need to open our eyes and to realize that we are First Nations people and that we are strong to the core. It's who we are. But I thank you so, so much for reminding us of that.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Kim. And also why the fasting is important. You know, when we do that out on the land, and because our elders have told us that, you know, the lake is going to speak to you. It's going to tell you what to do. The river is going to tell you what to do. And it's learning to listen, because the first thing through trauma is the disconnect. And also, if we look at trauma from our teachings, we know that it's soul loss. And that if there's soul loss, we know there's soul retrieval. And we can go on the internet and see on the Northwest Coast all of the different amulets used for soul retrieval. So really, you know, your daughter's helping you with the soul retrieval. It's awesome. Is there anything anyone wants to hear more about that I've covered so far?
Patricia, I'll just add that there's a comment in the chat from Emily Rakama, who says, Gitxaala, thank Gitxaala for sharing. Thank you for your courage and strength. And yeah, Kim, I'll post the link to the website that has the YouTube channel.
Perfect.
If there's time, I have a little poem that I wrote. I've started to not get back, but I started writing, and it's just a short poem, and it's a poem of hope and healing. It'll take me a minute to read, but I would feel honored to share it with the group if it's okay.
Sounds good.
Sounds good. So it's called Hope. My mind and heart weigh heavy with sadness and pain within the deepest spaces of my being. The trauma of losing a loved one spawns deep agony and suffering. Hold each other in our journey of healing. Feelings of loss, anger, and aching is reflected in the harsh, dark, ominous reds and hues of purple and blue, like a sometimes turbulent night storm. Remember, somewhere hidden deep within the roots of pain is hope. heal from what we know, what we live and share, inducing radiant colors of white and yellow, like the ever-changing rise and set of the sun, hold each other in our journey of healing. Surrounding us is the dark reality of what is lost and what hope can be. Acknowledge the love of the land, her abundance of landscape for healing in all its wonders, shapes, and forms. Take heed the bounty of love and forgiveness the land has to offer, and ground ourselves in that pure light that the Creator has shared with us. Hold each other in our journey of healing. The slightest whiffs of sacred smudges with its healing aromas of sage, cedar, tobacco, and sweetgrass are at our grasp. The time for prayer and honoring is among us while we opened our mind, body, and spirit to the bounty of land. Create spaces that we can acknowledge and learn the healing ways of our ancestors. Hold each other in our journey of healing.
Thank you. Thanks, Kim. There's one thing I want to speak to in your poem, and it's how the hope and the repulsion are both in the same place, deep in the brain. And while I was on Haidagwai, the neurofeedback I did was called Alpha Down. And what it did was it trained brain waves into the relaxed mode or state. And what happened after about a month of this brain training twice a week, people began to have memories that were uncomfortable because their brain was relaxing. So they were remembering. And they were also having memories of the resources and the love and the sense of belonging. So it is so that they're both together. People say, I don't want to go back to what happened to me when I was a child. I don't want to remember. And the thing about it is, for me, going back has been about learning how to love and how to not judge me or criticize me, but to work to understand me and accept me. Because if I can do that for me, then I can do that for you. And I really want to do that for you. So that's the interconnectedness as well. That's about the interconnectedness in my internal world and then in my internal world with all that's out there. And, you know, I'll say it's not about sugar and spice, even though I like sugar and spice. It's really about learning to live in truth and how to speak the truth with respect and with love. And I've only been able to do that as I've been helped to go really deeply into it all, into the hell. So you're also, if you want links or books or resources, you're also welcome to email me. I think, do you have my website? Just looking to see. Did that go on? I typed it into the chat, but I'm not seeing it when I press return going into the chat. Okay, so it's patriciajunevickers.com. And if there's anything further that you want, any resources, just email me. And I'm happy to send them to you. So let's close if I have time. Yes, I have time. Let's close with one more orientation exercise. So again, connecting with your breath. Noticing any tension or any stress in your body. And letting it go down through your limbs, your legs especially, and your feet down to the earth. Feeling yourself held in your chair by gravity and what that feels like. That constant energy that holds us all. And then with your eyes closed, seeing in your mind and in your brain the wall behind you, the wall to your right and to your left, and the wall straight in front of you. How high the ceiling is from where you're seated, and the floor, how far it is if your feet aren't on the floor, where the door is, where you came in and where you'll go out, if there are any windows in your room. And then where your room is situated in the building you're in. And going out from there, where your building sits on the land, roads, and orienting yourself to the east where the sun rises. And what it's like as it rises. And its pathway at this time of the year across the sky to where it sets in the west. And being aware of how it feels inside of your body as you see all these things. Any thoughts that are coming, just watching them and not attaching to them, just watching. Where the ocean is from where you're seated, or the river, or lakes. And coming back to your body, seated where you're seated. And slowly coming back. And if your camera's on, making connection with your eyes to others who are in this room, in this breakout room. Awesome. So may you all continue to inquire into love and what love actually means, what it really means and truly means. Thank you for this time and for being here. It's an honor to be with you. I'm going to wait till you leave the room. I'm not going to be the first to go.
Thank you so much, Patricia.
Yeah.
Just as a reminder to everyone else that if you're ready to head back to the main session, you can click leave room on the bottom right, and you can click leave breakout room. That'll take you back to the main session. If you leave meeting, that's going to exit you out of the Zoom.